Hey everyone, welcome to Wax Pack Wisdom. I'm Jake T. O'Donnell. So we're on a roll with pickups this week. I showed this week the 1954 Red Heart Dog Food Mickey Mantle card that I got. And today, the next day, Wednesday, a card that I won in the REA auction that closed on Sunday arrived today. Very quick. Shout out to REA. Amazing work that those folks do. Invoiced on Monday. I won the auction Sunday, invoiced on Monday. The card's here on Wednesday. Amazing stuff. They're based in New Jersey, and I'm in Massachusetts, so it can move more quickly that way. Originally it said it was supposed to show up tomorrow, Thursday, but it showed up today. So I won one card in the RA auction. I teased this in the video that I did yesterday, and it is this 1922 Neilson's Chocolates V61 of Grover Cleveland Alexander. And I'm realizing that I forgot to plug my light in. So I'm going to pause this because I want you to really be able to see it. Hold on one second. Okay, sorry about that. Yesterday was the first episode that I've done where I bought a new lamp to put over my desk to help with the glare somewhat. So again, here it is. SGC 1.5. Grover Cleveland Alexander. V61. So the V means that this was a Canadian brand. This is a Canadian card. These came in packs of chocolates. The front looks probably familiar. This image was used in a lot of sets, and in particular, it was used in the same year, the American Caramel set. The exact same set, exact same cards. And of 120 stars, and then I think there was a set of 180 that they did later on. This is a type 1. There's two different types of the Neilson's chocolate cards from this year, this set. The type 1s have this writing on the back, and you notice the really cool ornate calligraphy writing of the brand there. The type 2s are kind of just plain text. They don't have the cool sort of calligraphic look of the writing on Neilson. So 1.5, you see the crease running through it. Still a great card. So what ended up happening with me with this REA auction was this was one of the cards I was watching. I kind of had a plan to come away with. I wanted to come away with one card or one lot. I'll show kind of over here. The card that I really wanted in this auction was a really nice 1909 American Caramel of Frank Home Run Baker. I would have loved to have gotten this card. The problem was that the bidding got a bit out of hand for me, and it ended up going for what I thought was a fair amount, but I was happy to let it go. So then there were a couple of Grover Cleveland Alexander cards that were in the auction. One was a 1928 Tharps ice cream that was had a lot of staining on it. And then there was this. So I decided to put in a bid. I had bid on it earlier in the auction, then on Sunday night when it was closing, I put in one last bid on this once I realized that the Baker was going to go out of my price range, and the bid held up, and I ended up with it. So I've wanted a Grover Cleveland Alexander card for my collection for a long time. This is my first Playing Days card of his. It is also my first Neilson's chocolate card. I've had American Caramel cards in the past. I don't have. I've sold those off. And I'll just show you the back again because it's just so cool. So, yeah, again, Canadian brand of cards. So this card, there are 16 total graded copies of this card from what I could glean from the internet. There are 8 SGC graded versions of this card. There are 6 PSA graded versions of this, and there are 2 Beckett graded versions. So this is a Pop 16 pre-war Hall of Famer card. Not just a Hall of Famer, but one of the all-time greats. And I'm going to get into some stuff about Grover Cleveland Alexander in a second. One of the things about him is that this came up on a live stream that my friend Greg Midlife Cards did with a few other gentlemen, the great Mike Petty, Tony, Southern Collector, and Darren from Return to Collecting, but they're talking about hobby relevance of players. And Grover, this guy came up in the discussion, and the consensus was that even though this guy is one of the best pitchers of all time, he doesn't really have a signature card. And he's not in any of the tobacco sets. His rookie year is 1911, so he kind of misses out on getting to be in the T206 set or the T205 set. He's not in the T207 set. I don't think he's in the triple folders or the mecha double folder set. He's not in any of those sets. His first really big card, in my opinion, is probably the 1914 Cracker Jack, and he's also in the 1915 Cracker Jack. So if you want to say that he has a signature card, it's probably one of those. He's also, I think maybe technically his rookie card is the 1913 game, America's the national game set. And then he's in all of the sets in the 20s. So most of his career, his best years are before World War I, and we'll get into that in a minute. There's not a lot of cards that he's on, and then he's in all of these 1920 sets. And it is fascinating to me that I really think, you look at how cool and ornate the design is on this card. I think this and American Caramel, I think these are the best 1920s sets. It's fascinating to me that the best card sets in the sort of pre-war era are all from 1900s, 1910s, and then the 20s are kind of an era where there's just a lot of drab-looking cards. It's a lot again, this one has the cool design, but a lot of them are just black and white images of the players. There's a lot of strip cards, which I'm not a huge fan of. There's, the cash in publications, photos, late in the 20s. And then you get into the 30s, and that's when the card sets start to get really cool again, with U.S. Caramel, and then obviously Gaudy, Diamond Stars, and it goes from there. The 1920s, there's just not, the sets are just kind of blasé. And it's interesting getting into sort of and again, I know this is a Canadian card, so it doesn't really count, but the 1920s are this era of American extravagance and decadence, and the jazz era, and Great Gatsby, and all of that stuff. But the cards are just they're not reflective of the times. And it's interesting because then you get into the Depression, and the cards get a lot more interesting. But that's maybe a discussion for another day. Let's talk a little bit about this guy, Grover Cleveland Alexander. Again, one of the best pitchers of all time. A little bit unheralded in the current time frame, the current era. Doesn't, I don't think, get as much love either from the hobby or from history as, Walter Johnson or Christy Mathewson, or even an Eddie Plank or Ed Walsh. He belongs in the conversation with those guys as one of the best dead ball pitchers who then sort of transcended the era. Once Babe Ruth came in and the live ball era started, he was still really great. And he's from Nebraska. I'm recording this on February 26th. Today would have been his birthday. He was born in 1887, so he wouldn't be alive today, but he was born on February 26th. So happy birthday to Grover Cleveland Alexander. His father was I don't want to get political, but his father was a Democrat and named his son after the guy who was the president at the time. He was born in Nebraska. He signs with the Phillies, makes his debut in 1911 with them. He spends a lot of years with the Phillies, the Cubs. At this point, he's with the Cubs, even though you can see he's wearing, I think they airbrushed out the P on his jersey, but it says still P on his hat, and it says he's with the Cubs at this point. Famously is with the Cardinals, and we're going to get to that in a minute. And then I think he goes back and finishes his career with the Phillies. What the history says about him was that he was an incredible control pitcher, and he was very tough to face, very tough to beat. And he puts up absolutely incredible numbers through about 1918, 1919. And then he goes into World War I, and unfortunately, he is never quite the same after that. He was shell-shocked. He had epileptic seizures previously, and they got worse after the war. And then, unfortunately, to kind of deal with a lot of his issues, he developed a drinking problem. And in spite of all of that, he continued to pitch well into his 40s. So ultimately, a bit of a tragic figure. But I wanted to share two passages from The Glory of Their Times. And this is the first time I've shown this book on the channel. This is my copy of the book. I still have one chapter left. I still got to read the Paul Wainer chapter. But I wanted to share two passages that I'm just going to read directly from the book. And the first one is from, for those who don't know, this is an oral history of the early years of the popularity of baseball, especially the early 1900s. It was written in the 1960s by Lawrence Ritter. And he went around the country and interviewed baseball players from that were still alive that had played in that era. He was inspired to write the book after the death of after the death of Ty Cobb. And so, again, he went all over the country and interviewed a bunch of these players that were still alive. So the first passage I'm going to read is from Hans Lobert, who was a shortstop with the played or a third baseman mostly. Actually played some shortstop, but for a bunch of different teams. But in particular, he was with the Phillies when Grover Cleveland Alexander joined the squad. So I'm going to read the passage, and you'll see that I'm going to show you right here. There's a picture of Grover Cleveland Alexander in his rookie year. So I'll read this. In the spring of 1911, Dode Paskert and I were traded to the Phillies, and a new rookie in the Phillies camp for the first time that spring was a big fellow by the name of Grover Cleveland Alexander. As you know, Alex got to drinking very heavily later in his career, but to the best of my knowledge, he didn't drink at all at the time. He was really something back then. I was with the Phillies for 4 years, 1911 through 1914, and he was terrific every one of those years. In his rookie year, Alex won 28 games, and at one point that season, he pitched 4 shutouts in a row. And the thing is, he wasn't even at his peak yet. In 1915, 16, and 17, he won 30 or more games each season, and in 1916, he had 16 shutouts. For a right-handed pitcher in Baker Bowl in Philadelphia, where they played then, that was almost impossible to believe. The right field fence was only 280 feet away and cut straight over to center field. That park was a heaven for a left-handed hitter. Alex was really an amazing pitcher. He had little short fingers and threw a very heavy ball. Once later on, when I'd moved over to the Giants, Alex hit me over the heart with a pitch ball, and it bore in like a lump of lead hitting you. I couldn't get my breath for 10 minutes afterward. Matty was just as fast, but he threw a much lighter ball. Anyway, like I said, Alex didn't drink when he first came up. He didn't really start to drink heavily until after he came back from the war in 1919. He wasn't any youngster when he first came up either. He must have been 24 or 25 by then. I guess he started in baseball late. He was a great big guy with a fine build. Now, you know they always seem to remember Alex as an old man, and the only thing you hear about is that he came in at the age of 39 and struck out Tony Lazzeri to save the 1926 World Series for the Cardinals. But in those days, he wasn't any 39 years old. He was in his 20s, and he had a powerful constitution. Funny thing, he never ran like pitchers are supposed to. He'd get around third base to field some ground balls, and that would be that. Alex's big problem was that he took epileptic fits on the bench, and that continued all the years we played together. Maybe 2 or 3 times a season he'd have an epileptic seizure on the bench. He'd froth at the mouth and shiver all over and thrash around and sort of lose consciousness. We'd hold him down and open his mouth and grab his tongue to keep him from choking on himself. It was awful. But, so that gives you a sense of just sort of how great he was in that sort of early era of his career. And then I want to read the passage from Bob O'Farrell. So Bob O'Farrell was the 1926 National League MVP, and he was with the Cardinals. That year, the Cubs decide to kind of cut bait on Grover Cleveland Alexander, and he gets picked up, or his contract gets bought out he gets let go by the Cubs and gets picked up by the Cardinals. And this is a great era for the Cardinals. Now, this is the most famous individual accomplishment of Alexander's career. And Bob O'Farrell talks about it in his chapter in the book. He's talking about the 1926 World Series. That was the World Series, the famous one against the Yankees, where old Grover Cleveland Alexander, at the tail end of his long career, came in late in the 7th game to strike out Tony Lazzeri and save the series for the Cardinals. I guess that's maybe the most famous strikeout in the whole history of baseball, wouldn't you say? I had caught Alex for years on the Cubs before we were both traded to the Cardinals. I think he was as good or as better as any pitcher who ever lived. He had perfect control and a great screwball. He used to call it a fadeaway, same as Mathewson. I don't believe Alex was much of a drinker before he went into the Army. After he got back from the war, though, he had a real problem. When he struck out Lazzeri, he'd been out on a drunk the night before and was still feeling the effects. See, Alex had pitched for us the day before and won. He had beaten the Yankees in the 2nd game of the World Series and again in the 6th game, pitching the complete game both times. He was 39 years old then and naturally wasn't expecting to see any more action. However, after the 6th game was over, Rogers Hornsby, our manager, told Alex that if Jesse Haynes got in any trouble the next day, he would be the relief man, so he should take care of himself. Well, Alex didn't really intend to take a drink that night, but some of his friends got a hold of him and thought they were doing him a favor by buying him a drink. Well, you weren't doing Alex any favor by buying him a drink because he just couldn't stop. So in the 7th inning of the 7th game, Alex is tight asleep in the bullpen, sleeping off the night before when trouble comes. He had won 3 games in the series. We had each won 3 games in the series, and now all the chips were down. The score was 3-2 in our favor going into the bottom of the 7th inning of the 7th game. Jesse Haynes pitching for us against Herb Pennock for the Yankees. Suddenly, Haynes starts to tire. The Yankees get the bases loaded with 2 out, and the next batter up is Tony Lazzeri. Rogers, Hornsby, and I gather around Haynes at the pitching mound. Jesse's fingers are a mass of blisters from throwing so many knuckleballs, and so Hornsby decides to call in old Alex, even though we know he just pitched the day before and he'd been up most of the night. So he comes in, shuffling in slowly from the bullpen to the pitching mound. "Can you do it?" asks Hornsby. "I can try," says Alex. We agree that Alex should pitch Lazzeri low and away, nothing up high. Well, the first pitch is a perfect low curve for strike 1. But the second one comes in high, and Tony smacks a vicious line drive that lands in the left field stands just foul. Oh, it's foul by maybe 10 feet. Actually, from home plate, I can see it's going to be foul all the way because it's curving from the time it got halfway out there. Of course, I'm giving it plenty of body English, too, just to make sure. The pitch had been high, so I run out to Alex. "I thought we were going to pitch him low and outside." "He'll never get another one like that," Alex says. And he didn't. The next pitch was a low outside curve, and Tony Lazzeri struck out, fanned him on 3 pitches. Most people seem to remember that as happening in the 9th inning of ending the ball game. It didn't. It was only the 7th inning, and we had 2 innings still to go. In the 8th, Alex sat down the Yankees in order and the first 2 men in the 9th. Then, with two out in the bottom of the 9th, he walked Babe Ruth. Bob Musial was next up, but on the first pitch to him, the Babe took off for second. Alex pitched, I fired the ball to Hornsby and caught Babe stealing, and that was the last play of the World Series. So that tells the story of the most famous moment of his career. So again, Glory of Their Times. Please read this book. If you haven't, go and get it and read it. It's just the best. So anyway, that story of the best thing that happened in his career, the most famous thing happened in his career, happened 4 years after this card came out, and this card has survived to this day, and that story survives to this day, and that's what we'd like to talk about here on Waxpack Wisdom. So hope you learned something today about Grover Cleveland Alexander. I'm thrilled to add this card to my my collection. As you can see, it's in an old SGC slab, so I will be sending this in a future order to be reholdered and sit with the rest of my collection for the rest of time. So thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate it. Let me know what you think in the comments of this card. Do you have any of these Neilson's chocolate cards? Is there one that you want in your collection? Let me know in the comments. Would love to hear it. Please check out our ComC store below. Please check out the list of our favorite nonprofits and charities. Please check out where to follow us on all social media channels. We'll be back with 59 Tops Friday on Friday this week. And again, please subscribe to Waxpack Wisdom if you have not. We have an awesome giveaway plan for 1,000 subscribers, and we're kind of stuck in that 770 range. So please subscribe. We would love to get to 1,000 soon. So thanks very much for watching Waxpack Wisdom, and we'll see you next time. Take care.